impressed by the high level of this Congress, and particularly what we just heard in this morning's session, the presentations of Irima, Jaume, and Luis. Really, I am embarrassed because I cannot compare myself to the levels of these three panel members. I do not have their background. I do not have their experience. So I would prefer to cede the floor to you, to those that are affected by this exposure to these toxic substances, or to the members of the family of victims, so that you can address the panelists. For instance, those that do not receive the treatment in Spain, so that we can stop that immediately. Those who are claiming for certain types of therapy, those who are claiming for recognition of their condition, of their disease, those that are demanding to have the necessary measures and facilities, those that require necessary care and attention. I think this would be a good time to take advantage of the presence of the experts, so that we can know what we can do tomorrow, Monday, what to do if the situation is not changed radically. So please speak into the microphone, use the microphone for the questions, and you can address the panelists. I cede the floor to the audience.
I'd like to ask the question on the precautionary principle, because I can see where that could be a total stop of innovation. It's not that I'm not for it, but who makes the decision of the precautionary principle, and how does one prevent that from stopping innovation?
No sé si contestarle en inglés o en español. Contesto quizá.
I don't know what's the answer in English and Spanish. Spanish, I prefer Spanish. As I said, the precautionary principle, well, it's difficult to apply. The precautionary principle is difficult to apply. Administration, governments are responsible for its application. We have so many documents, treaties, and agreements. We have so many demands in these agreements for the government to apply the precautionary principle. Therefore, it is a political decision. Now the problem arises, and I mentioned four main problems, although there are more. The decision to apply and how to apply the precautionary principle is linked to the values, directly linked to the values of the policymakers. That's the problem, you see, that's the problem. This is the social framework, so to speak, the social framework that determines the success of the application of the precautionary principle, or its failure. And it is not a theoretical obligation. The problem, I don't know whether I'm explaining this well, or I don't know whether I explained it well because of lack of time, but in a practical context, the precautionary principle is a principle of common sense. It's a principle of values. It simply states that before introducing new technology, use your common sense. If you do not have a safer alternative, you have to determine if you have a safer alternative, and you should not only consider 1 year, but and its effects on health and the environment, but the effects years later, its effects on the future generation. So that's the main problem. That's the reason why it's necessary to have interdisciplinary approach, because the problem has to do with the lack of awareness of the risks. Even scientists, when synthetic products are used, when we have the synthetic products, even scientists are unaware of of the effects of these substances on human health and on the environment. The transgenic seeds of certain cereals, for instance, after 2, 3 generations, they will no longer be efficient because the viruses and bacteria that have been produced by the pesticides or by the insecticides have become more resistant to the pesticides. And that's what happens to the antibiotics. There's so many variables that it's practically impossible for the scientists to understand the risks. And it's even harder for the policymakers and for the politicians to understand that. So that's the reason why it's necessary to have this integrated approach of different working groups.
Thank you so much. It's been an excellent exposition this morning. I wanted to ask Dr. Bertelli about something in particular. What I see is that there are several arms of the problem that faces society in this particular context of the medical provision of health. One is that doctors can be attacked, and therefore indirectly patients can be deprived of their doctor's services, or the products can be attacked that the doctors require for treatment, and they all form different parts of legislation, so that in order for an individual to stand up for her or his own human rights to health, we have to take things in a number of directions. So we'd have to be very clear about the law, and we'll rely on people like you to help us to defend the doctors and to defend the products so that we can defend the individuals.
Gracias por sus elogios.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your comments. Evidently, you're right. And I'm sure my colleagues up here will agree with me. We have the need to have different professionals involved, and we have a problem because we have to move in different fields. At level of administration, at the legal level, medical level, etc. So what we have perhaps is the problem of different watertight situations that separate the different groups that are necessary to cope in an integrated way with this problem. The laws comprise a puzzle. The legal system is like a puzzle. If we take a piece of that puzzle out, we will no longer have a complete legal system. It is necessary to approach completely from the different perspectives of the legal system a certain situation. Sometimes we have limitations because of lack of awareness of other parts of the legal system. The legal system protects the patient's rights and also the doctor's rights. They have a right to apply their techniques with the products they need, with the medication they need to be able to provide that right to the patients. So what we have to do is right now question what is not being done right. We should not defend ourselves. We should question what has been done up until now and what has not been done up until now. So really, we're turning the tables, so to speak. We use the constitutional guarantee for protection of rights and all of the other elements of the legal system to start this battery of actions to achieve our goals. We are familiar with the value the Americans give to their Constitution, and we should act the same way here.
I wish I were as convinced as you about the value of the American Constitution, since it's been, because of some recent Supreme Court decisions that have severely undercut it. I guess what I'd like to do is to make a few quick comments and then get your responses. I think that the three of you are trying to deal with what's obviously extraordinarily complex and difficult subjects. And so I guess my views here are not that I obviously have great respect for what you're trying to do, but I guess I'd like to suggest a different point of view that may or may not be helpful here. What we have here, and I'm referring to the issue of, the precautionary principle and the issue that was raised, is this undermining capitalism? I think, in fact, it supports capitalism. The problem is not capitalism. The problem is theft. If you have a capitalist system, so-called, and I think it's a misnomer to call it that, which externalizes its costs, where companies generate costs which are paid for by others, then what you have is theft. And that's exactly the situation that you have when you produce toxic chemicals and you release them in the environment, and other people end up paying for them through their health. The same issue is central to the issue of electromagnetic sensitivity and other kinds of damage that's produced. What we've had here, I think, internationally, is a clear and obvious breakdown of the regulatory systems. We've seen this in the issue of the Gulf War, the Gulf Coast oil spill was a disastrous breakdown in regulatory system. We see it in Japan with the nuclear disaster, and we've seen it elsewhere. The regulatory systems don't work internationally. They've been corrupted. So how do we deal with this? It seems to me that maybe what we need to do is to set up a system where people can sue for damages under reasonable circumstances. Because I don't see any other way of dealing with this that's going to work. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to say, well, okay, if the cell phone system is damaging people's health, maybe we need to give the cell phone companies, something like 5 years to fix the thing so that it doesn't completely destroy them. But having done that, if they don't do that, they should be sued. And they should then suffer the consequences. They know what the liability is. They know what the issues are. They may deny it, but they know it. Same thing goes for the chemical companies.
I'm going to answer in English, because if I hear English, it's easier. Basically, I agree. I mean, when I was talking about the anti-capitalist system, it was just the element of the capitalism by itself, because the the system as it is proposed is much more economical. The precautionary principle is creating a much more economical system in the terms of economies, is much more it's much more efficient, if you like, than the last one, the old one that we are in, and that's basically because what I was trying to say by capitalism is that it's increasing value for some of them, but not for all of us. If it's not for all of us, then it's not a good economic system. And so I agree with you that we have to kind of make a point there. And then on the second question, basically, I also agree. The problem is that the regulatory process in that you have to move in any case within the legal terms, because the problem is that when you want to sue this company in the telecommunication industry or the chemical industry or the GMOs, they're all work within a legal frame. So to sue them, you actually need to have established previously the elements to actually sue them and the tools that are legally accepted in the system. If you don't have those tools, then you cannot sue them. Because if they say, nowadays we have nanotechnology everywhere, and there is not a clue within the legal system that exists. So therefore, if that knowledge doesn't arrive to the political and legal system, there is no a structure that supports you suing such and such company. So therefore we can, although you're right, there is a need for of developing the legal and political systems that we agree. I mean, it's going to go always maybe a few years later, but it's not necessary to go 100 years later behind. If you go 100 years behind, you're going to have millions and thousands of deaths or cancers or suffering. So, although I agree conceptually and theoretically, in practicality, that's very difficult to kind of implement, if you like. But it's a very good point, because that's the way it should be, definitely.
Hola, yo primero felicito.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you, particularly and especially Mr. Luis Bertelli. Oh, sorry. A comment before. I would like to make some comments. I agree with you that we should start suing. Right, I can hear you better now, yes. I agree with you. We should make demands, we should sue. We cannot, I presented some things that are theoretical, but I'm very practical. If we have a product that produces injury and the company will not withdraw that product from the marketplace, what we have to do is to start suing, and we should start that immediately. In Catalonia, it is very clear. Fumigations were being done systematically, routinely, until we had the court rulings that made those responsible pay for this. Until that occurred, there were no changes. Until we had filed a case against a director of a company and the court ruling found him guilty, nothing was done, you see. It was not done because they believed that the product was harmful. They introduced the necessary measures because the director was found guilty. You see, definitely we have to go to court. We have to go with a good specialist to demonstrate that chronic fatigue is directly related to the exposure to organophosphates. So, and of course we can use the press, but that will only draw the attention of the media when you win the case. So, and once you win that case in court, then you will get more publicity. So really, that's what's very important. Information in the media and money are two things a capitalist system is worried about all the time. So really, I think we should get people, as Mr. Bertelli has said, people outside the system, a lawyer who's opposed to the system. We wanted to represent a group that were exposed to asbestos, and that was they had a lawyer represent them, but that lawyer usually worked and defended entrepreneurs. They defended companies. So really, because they were more prestigious, so they were selected. So I agree with you that it's better to get independent lawyers, lawyers that oppose the system, and we will always need the experts, those that are familiar with the legal background. I would like to state, Dr. Martin Paul, that you're right. You're logical. Law is pure logic. Law is pure logic. So the step must be different, because if we turn to the Constitution, it's the highest law, which is not so respected here in our country, in Europe, as yours is in the United States. It says the Constitution is the supreme law and makes it mandatory for the legal system and the judges comply by the Constitution. Each judge can represent the law as they wish, but if you cite Article 5.1 of the Constitution, they're obliged to apply the Constitution. And if that is not done by the judge, then the judge can be accused of not being respectful of the Constitution, and they can even be separated from the career, according to 4171, Article 4171. Really, and as we heard before, we should avoid the situations where you have a representative of the entrepreneurs representing the patient groups. I'm speaking on behalf of patients that are being treated by myself and Dr. Pilar Muñoz Calero. We are getting people to sign up. We have a form. We want to get signatures, and we don't know what to do with that afterwards. Could you give us some information in that regard? Yes, I think Jaume can give us the most practical approach. I have read very little the statement that you are asking the signatures for. Oh, it has to do with treatment. Microphone, please. No, the right to treatment, as we heard from Mr. Bertelli, is a constitutional right. What I was explaining is different. I was speaking about the right to health care according to our Social Security system and laws. So that is a constitutional right. And the one I was referring to is the NHS regulations and norms. The right to be attended to by physicians, like in all types of diseases, has to do with the contract. You have a contract. Those of us, those of you who pay your social security fees, have a contract with the NHS. You have coverage that is stipulated in the NHS regulations. And if you have been paying for 20 years, your um, social security services, and you're not attended to, then that contract there's a breach of contract. You have a right to that service based on your contract, whereas the other issue that's being addressed has to do with the constitutional rights. And a more complicated situation would be to have this treatment, these services available within the NHS. That's also another issue that we should deal with. And that the different companies that work with the NHS should provide this coverage, because we have this coverage for occupational injuries, accidents, and occupational diseases in the system, NHS system here now. And that is also, there's also a contract that we pay a certain amount of our social security fees for that type of coverage. So really, one has to do with contracts and the other one has to do with constitutional rights. So, excuse me, so what, concerning the question that was raised, in practice, with all of the signatures they're trying to get, what can they do? What can they do with those signatures? Yes, as you were saying, Luis, as Luis said, you can present that in Parliament. You can present that to the Constitutional Court. You can present that directly. Yes, that's the way. You have two actions. You present that to administration, which we're doing right now. If they do not answer, then we'll go to court, to the Constitutional Court and to Parliament based on Article 15 of our Constitution, our right to life, our right to the protection of our life. That's in Article 15 of Constitution. That is guaranteed. It also guarantees the medical services that should be provided, and that is also covered in Article 29 of the Constitution. You have a right individually or as a group to make demands. And so we can present that. If that is not answered, then we can recur to Article 14 bar 4-2001. And first, we have to use this approach. The only problem is that if we go to court, it's necessary to get the courts to answer, as Dr. Martin Paul mentioned. Logic, as I said to Dr. Martin Paul, the law is based on logic. The law is based on common sense. If we have a country in the center of Europe where the courts are not really independent, not fully independent, but sufficiently independent to cope with the situation, then we've won the battle. I have I have a question for Dr. Rea and Dr. Irina de la Flor. In Madrid, unfortunately, we have chloramine added to potable water. Dr. Rea, do you believe that chloramine is toxic, right? Yes. If it is toxic, Dr. de la Flor, we right now will demand for removal of chloramine, and water should use potable water should be treated with chlorine. At least it is not as toxic as chloramine. Now, if you access internet, you will find that there's a group of patients in California that cannot bath, that cannot shower. They have to go to another town where chloramine is not used 2 or 3 times a week. If you look at the pictures, you'll see they look like lepers. Their skins are affected, sight affected because of exposure to chloramine. It appears to be that no one knows anything about chloramine here in Spain. We have not had cases either. But a precautionary measure should be taken. I'm not saying that chlorine is better. It's toxic also, but chloramine is much more toxic. It's chlorine plus ammonia, right? It's an atomic bomb. So perhaps right now we can start signing up this demand to remove chloramine, and the policymakers should take away chloramine from our potable water and not have the situation like the one they have in California. Thank you very much. For these, from the viewpoint of the Organization for the Defense of Health, we are developing a framework to work with different independent lawyers firms and jurists, and as Yolanda, I think Yolanda mentioned before, to try to defend your rights. The problem we have is public demands will require names and surnames, individuals or group of individuals with names. So, of course, I'm at your service to prepare all of these demands. We, of course, are exposed to so many risks. This is just one of them. Each group is asking for a specific action to be taken, specific measures to be taken, a specific right to be defended. As Professor Bertelli said before, we have to look at all of the legal aspects, all of the legal perspectives, and of course, we'll be providing you our legal services through the Vivo Sana Foundation, and this is a non-profit organization, and we will try to provide you all the professional services of lawyers, legal services, so that you can take that to court or claim at the appropriate or pertinent body. So if that is done well, that can be achieved. Concerning that point, if I may, there is also a question. We have had lots of demands on pesticides. I think the situation of pesticides in Spain really, it's really out of control. Pesticides are really out of control in Spain. In Alicante, there's one person who had to leave Alicante. And it is what's being used is prohibited. Chlorpropos, for instance, and it is used in, at schools, parks, everywhere. And it's known to be harmful. There are studies that have already demonstrated that thousands of articles that relate this pesticide used in Alicante, but there's no prevention, no common sense being used, and people have to leave their homes, go to other places each time they fumigate in spring or in October. It's a public health issue. I'm a patient. I've been treated by Dr. Pilar Muñoz Calero for the past 6 months now. All of your presentations have been interesting. Dr. Jaume, Irina's presentation, and Mr. Bertelli's presentation. I had to leave my job because of problems to exposure to fragrance and the products used to clean the office, the workplace. I think as victims, we should not ask for recognition of the disability and the right to health and the right to treatment only. We should also demand for our right to work. I don't have depression or allergies that make me incompetent. I'm useful. I can work. I can serve society. but we have to be in a place that is free from these toxins or harmful products. As Dr. Rina had mentioned, and this also interests me, in the morning, early in the morning, I do exercise, I walk, and I'm concerned not only for myself, but for the population at large. When I see these buildings with so many mobile phone station antennas, there are 4 or 5 base station antennas on those buildings, and I'm sure that affects the residents of those buildings. And I think it's necessary to demand our rights to health, and we should work in a united way, together, and not be divided. Divide and conquer, as they say. And we should not be working one in Catalonia, another group in Barcelona, etc. We should work together. Some say that there's no treatment to those conditions. Others say that, as Jean Monroe said, there are treatments. Pilar Muñoz Calero says that there is a treatment. Dr. Reyes says that there is a treatment. And so we should get our NHS to give us this treatment. We want the treatment to be provided, and we should not accept that answer that there is no treatment, or we should not accept also the imposition of a certain pharmaceutical industry's product on us. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the foundations and to thank the speakers and to thank everyone who is working to achieve our goals. But we should work, I must emphasize, together. I am a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. Yes, you were granting me a title which I don't deserve. I'm a lawyer. I agree with you and with all of your comments. I think as a group, we should be aware that things take time. When you visit groups in the United States, in Europe, in Latin America, you'll see how much they're working and how well they're doing things. They're not more hardworking than we are, or perhaps it's not due to the fact that they might receive more funding. It's simply a question of time. I always try to be positive and optimistic because I believe that people are the most important part of this action. If people consider the health of their children to be more important than other products that are sold to us by industry, if people put their right to health, their health, above products that marketing campaigns try to get us to purchase, society, the more informed it is, the more it will support us. We have the information, but we are few. That's the reason why, to defend health from the perspective of our Organization for the Defense of Health and the groups we work with, we also focus on providing and spreading information. This is important. We also know that there is a campaign, such as studies that say that transgenics, GMOs entail risks, and after that is published, you get 10 articles defending GMOs. But nonetheless, one has to be optimistic. we should be, we should always remember that truth will prevail. In the long run, it will prevail. We have to get each judge, each patient, each doctor, each lawyer, everyone to be involved, and time is necessary, but truth will prevail. Human values should rank above economic values. This is the most important factor. If you look at it from a global perspective, this happens at all levels. The economic crisis, crisis of democracy, crisis in the health setting, within the health context. It has to do with values and the rank order we give them. The protagonists of the crisis are always the same. As Martin Paul said, there is theft. The question has to do with theft. It is common to the civilization. That's the reason why I stated that change is not only possible, it is inevitable. It is inevitable for society to provide answers. We cannot have pesticides killing children or base station antennas. This is logical, but time is needed, and together we are stronger. And let's be positive. There are many people, many professionals who are working hard in Europe, in the United States, and they're achieving many important things.
Perdón, vamos a hacer usted, Raquel.
Raquel, you and someone else there at the back of the room? Yes, well, we'll have 5 more, and we'll have to close because some people will have to travel and they have to catch a plane or train. Okay? Mr. Bertelli, I appreciate your words. The first president of the Constitutional Court in the pre-constitutional time said that Spain will be divided into groups of interests. And you will have groups with political interests. You'll have these lobby groups. I've worked in the public administration. I've worked in the field of education. And I did an anti-master of management, of policymakers. I learned from the policymakers what their approach was like. I learned from them.
Depresión,
creating lobbies
sobre la clase política,
to influence on the political groups is of interest.
In what way it would be interesting to have the lobby groups closer to the policymakers? Who do you think should be leading these lobby groups? In 5 minutes. Well, thank you. And I've also heard about you. I know you, and when you yesterday, you told us that you thought you were a pariah because of what you think and do. When you decide to do what you think it is right to do, you stop being a pariah. And here the new thing is something that is transcendental. Because if we watch this according to what we've achieved in the last 15, 20, 30 years, well, we've defended ourselves from unjustified attacks and the vested attacks of third parties that were against us, taking credit away from us. But if we create this international center in Central Europe, well, again, there'll be a number of actions issued that will compensate for the lack of knowledge, ignorance and lack of consideration for the credit-worthy actions of many people, because we only come to the newspapers when we are denounced, when people complain against us. But if we get positive action, we will be on the media as people defending ourselves from libel. And if we could get William Rea eligible for the Nobel Award, we will also be on the news with a positive action. And if we achieve him to be awarded a Nobel Prize, there will be much more recognition to our own actions. And the people who will sponsor this action, it's on us, because those who are already installed comfortably on the system, or those that are higher up because, well, now they like to be sitting there up there comfortably. Now they are doing nothing in order to help us. But we, together, we, in our common action, we will be united in moral action and in legal action, because we will be filing lawsuits in a different way in order to get favorable court decisions. And we will be on the positive side. And we will not be on the news because of being attacked, but we will be on the news because we will be defending ourselves against libel. And we will be now ready because we will know who are the people who are on the boat, and we will be strong enough to keep on rowing and rowing without having people who would be sabotaging our own actions in the boat, creating a hole to sink the boat. Be careful. Mention has been made of the pesticides. Jaume has talked about the chlorpyrifos, and I'd like to say something. I'd like to share what we've said and done thanks to the Fundación. We got in touch with the sufferers from the fumigations, and we helped them to ask for the compliance, the enforcement of the law. First, people must know that nobody has the right to apply systematic fumigations. First, there must be an evaluation of the situation. There must be a 12-hour safety period. In outdoors, nobody should go by, and nobody paid attention to the safety period when the pesticide is applied. And I was the first one to go through a field that had been recently fumigated, and nobody had warned me that this pesticide had been applied on that field. So you must make sure that you get the right number of signatures, but signatures of people who have been duly informed about the regulation. And you must do it. And if you don't get the enforcement of the law, it's your right to go out and complain with your own identity card. And I have even complained against my own neighborhood, and I have filed a complaint against myself, because I have filed a complaint against my own neighborhood, you know. So I'll be the person who filed the complaint, but also the person accused, you know. And I'll make sure that the neighbors will be with me, and also the different authorities involved and the police involved. Everybody should come and hear about it. And I also ask the following. This was started at the first meeting of environmentally induced diseases. And please become united in order to tackle the problems of the EHS amongst the pupils, the students in primary schools. Please do ask about what type of cleaning detergents they use in different schools for you to demand the usage of the products that are safer. And it's up to you to establish under what conditions these cleaning substances should be used. The pesticides were applied in different urban developments, and they are banned in indoors. I don't know whether you know where they have been applied during 3 months. Well, I found out that in the airport simulator rooms, the controllers and the students of the controllers were in a simulation room, and this clospodifos was being applied there. And I share this with you because it also has to do with money. Clospodifos is much more inexpensive than the bait for the insects and the cockroaches. Pyrethrines are not a good substitute, and I really had to complain because people at school wanted to apply pyrethrines closer to the swimming pool in an urban development. So it's up to us to fight these substances, filing complaints, and I'll bring the law enforcement agent along with me. I promise. And for you to know something that is important. Plazo de seguridad, safety period, even if you read 12 hours, it is the safety period. It is the time required by the chemical to destroy the insect, the pest. It doesn't have to do with the health of the individual. The safety period has to do with the time required by the chemical to kill the pest. And also, we must guarantee that people that might be exposed to that chemical require to be safe. Because the company fumigating might put up a sign stating nobody should go through this field during 12 hours. But be careful, because after 12 hours, you should clean thoroughly, you should ventilate, you should air the area, and you should make sure that this field or this area is again safe for the individual. I go to the microphone. I want to thank Pilar. I haven't met her, and it is the first time I meet her. And I am thankful to Pilar and to all the practitioners present here. I am thankful to all the patients and friends and the invisible people who have allowed for this meeting to be held. And I want to talk about the values, ethics, and Irina, over and over again, Irina de la Flor, has been mentioning values over and over again. Therefore, I have an image to share with you. From the beginning of humanity, we get to know about the cultural sphere that regulated also the legal system, and the pharaohs, the shaman, the priests, in an instinctive manner, would rule over the people. And little by little, we reach the Roman times, and it is then when we wonder what's new in the Roman Empire. Well, they develop the intellectual thinking. They develop the intellect to to walk away from the gods. So the Romans sacrificed themselves to favor the intellect, and law legislation was started, and then we little by little walked away from divine law towards human law. And the economic activity would still be involved in the legal activity. And thanks to English people, we reached the industrial age, and instinctively the economic life got closer to the pragmatic life. So the economic aspect got closer to the social sphere. So the earth is a living being with three spheres: the cultural sphere, the legal sphere, and the economic sphere. Okay, well then, there's a question. What principles, what values are regulating these three spheres? So we shouldn't forget our French friends who were courageous enough to provide this French Revolution. And they provided these three values that have always existed in humanity: liberty, justice, and fraternity. Okay, beautiful. But it was in abstraction, because now we are in the major chaos, because we should wonder these three values in relation to the three spheres. Where do they intervene? Freedom, would it belong into the cultural, legal, or the economic sphere? Freedom, or what sphere does it belong into? Fraternity, what sphere does it belong into? So, well, first we must know what law is regulating each sphere. If we haven't differentiated the function of the different spheres, there'll be chaos, because we also in the human body we have differentiated between the different functions of the different organs. And regarding planet Earth, we must also differentiate between the different spheres. If we want free trade according to capitalism, well, we've got it, because there isn't freedom, there isn't economic freedom. If there were economic freedom, the human needs would be met. And economics is a demand law. It isn't a demand and supply law. It is demand law. So here we cannot talk about free economy, therefore. And in the polarity, we get economic terms. And when we talk about the values, we haven't talked about the cultural life. We all went to school to, and in the cultural life, economic values come up. And in economic life, economic values come up as well. So if there's a good exchange between the cultural life and the economic life, where are we going to go to regain our values? We've lost the values, and it's good, because those values we were guided by were imposed on us from past events. Why are we losing our values? We wonder. This may be positive, because I think that I must get my own values according to my own mindset, according to my own spiritual light. So why not talk about the value of the education? Why aren't you talking about the educationalists in terms of the cultural sphere? We've heard about the intellectuals, but the intellectuals live in the abstraction, because they are thinking with their physical mind and as a physicist. But here you have worthy people who are thinking in terms of life. You are guided by life. You are humanists. And also, well, I work in Italy, and I always talk about the light of the Spanish population. And the Spanish population has lost the light, has lost the value. And in Latin America, we aren't guided by the beautiful light of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza.
Nos echan.
Decía el filósofo.
According to the philosopher, truth alone suffices. I have been diagnosed but not recognized as having sensitivity to polycarbons, PAH. And I had to leave my job 9 years ago. And I'm more or less just like that lady who spoke previously. I have all the papers here with me. I have presented the papers to court, and they paid no attention to me. So I am alone, struggling to defend my rights. I can't be exposed to air conditioning. I have leukopenia, and I'm allergic. I have sensitivity to low molecular weight products. And I haven't worked for years. I've had depression. Please, if you have specific question for each of the panelists, we have to close. No. Yes, please, if you have a question, please ask the question. You will get an answer. I want to know what I can do. What can I do? Since we spoke a lot about values, for defending values and for defending truth, I find myself in this situation. I hope you won't be alone any longer. You will have our support. That's the reason why I'm here. Thank you very much.